He invited me to a gala event as a joke, but regretted it when he saw me walk in.
This is a story about a man who thought he was telling a joke. Spoiler alert. He was the joke. Take a breath. It's going to get intense. Welcome to my library. I'm Lena, and our story is just beginning.
The library is quiet, except for the soft sound of my duster moving across leather-bound books, when Damien Cross's voice cuts through the silence with that particular edge of bored amusement he reserves for phone calls with people he doesn't actually like, and I'm debating whether to leave and give him privacy, or continue working, and pretend I can't hear him discussing why he's attending another charity gala without a date, when his response makes me freeze mid-motion, with the realization that whatever comes next is going to complicate my carefully maintained invisibility in ways I'm absolutely not prepared to handle. He's leaning against his desk, with that controlled elegance he wears like armor, all expensive suit and calculated indifference, and when his eyes land on me through the open door, I watch something shift in his expression that suggests an idea has just formed that I'm absolutely not going to enjoy being part of. Actually, I do have a date. I'm bringing my housekeeper. Should be entertaining to watch everyone try to figure out if I'm serious or just making a statement about class hierarchies. The way he says it makes it clear I'm not actually a date, but rather a social experiment he's conducting for his own amusement, and I find myself frozen with the duster in my hand, trying to decide if pretending I didn't hear is better than confronting the fact that my employer just volunteered me for public humiliation disguised as an invitation. He ends the call and looks at me directly for the first time in weeks. Really looks at me instead of just tracking my presence with the peripheral awareness he usually maintains when I'm cleaning rooms he occupies, and the intensity of his focus makes my skin prickle with awareness I absolutely refuse to acknowledge as anything other than appropriate concern about employment complications. You're attending the Bennett Foundation Gala with me Saturday night. Consider it a work assignment with compensation for your time and whatever clothing expenses you incur. Preparing for an event you'd never attend otherwise. Cross, I'm your housekeeper. Bringing me to a charity gala is either a joke at my expense or evidence you've finally lost touch with appropriate professional boundaries. I keep my voice steady, even though internally, I'm calculating exactly how this situation could destroy the careful invisibility I've maintained in a household where being noticed usually means being replaced. It's both. I'm making a point about social expectations, while simultaneously satisfying invitation requirements that specify companions are mandatory. You'll be compensated generously for tolerating an evening of people who'll either ignore you completely or treat you like an interesting curiosity depending on their particular brand of condescension. He says it so casually, like volunteering me for social warfare is just another household task equivalent to organizing his schedule or managing his dry cleaning. And if I refuse, what happens to my employment status when you're forced to actually find a willing date instead of just conscripting staff? Nothing happens to your employment. You're excellent at what you do, and I'm not petty enough to fire someone for declining optional assignments. His voice carries that dry irony I've learned to recognize as his default mode when dealing with anything emotional. No, though I would appreciate the favor if you're willing. Watching entitled people squirm when their assumptions get challenged is one of my few genuine pleasures, and your presence would facilitate that entertainment significantly. You want me to attend a formal event full of important people so you can use my existence as a way to make them uncomfortable. That's possibly the most honest thing you've ever said to me in 2 years of daily interaction. I contain multitudes. Most of them are terrible, but occasionally honesty sneaks through when I'm too tired to maintain appropriate filters. I should refuse. Should maintain the professional distance that's kept me safely employed in a house where staff turnover is legendary, and Damien Cross's reputation for being impossible to please is well documented. But something about the challenge in his expression, and the admission that he finds his own social circle insufferable, makes me curious about what it would feel like to exist in spaces I've only ever occupied as invisible help. Fine, I'll attend, but I have conditions. Name them? I'm in a generous mood. You don't introduce me as your housekeeper. You don't make jokes about my employment status to your friends, and if anyone is cruel, you intervene instead of just watching the entertainment unfold. I'm done, though intervening against cruelty might require me to be significantly less pleasant than my usual charming self. The way he says charming suggests he's fully aware that charm isn't among his readily accessible qualities. Anything else before we finalize this arrangement? Yes, this is a one-time event. After Saturday, we return to normal professional boundaries where you barely acknowledge I exist, and I continue cleaning your house without being used as social commentary. Agreed. One night of forcing people to confront their assumptions, and then back to comfortable invisibility for both of us. He moves closer with that predatory grace I've noticed, but never allowed myself to actually acknowledge as attractive because noticing your employer's physical presence is exactly the kind of complication that leads to unemployment. And when he's close enough that I can smell his cologne mixing with expensive whiskey from whatever he was drinking before this conversation started, I find myself trapped between the bookshelf and the reality that Damien Cross is significantly more aware of my existence than 2 years of careful distance suggested. You're going to surprise them. I can tell by the way you're standing there, pretending you're not intelligent and observant, and significantly more interesting than the furniture you're currently dusting. His voice has gone low and intimate, despite the professional context. I'm looking forward to watching them realize they've been underestimating someone right in front of them. Or you're setting me up for public humiliation and finding creative ways to justify why that's somehow beneficial to my character development. And perhaps both. I rarely do things for single, uncomplicated reasons. His hand comes up like he's going to touch my face before he catches himself. That almost contact somehow more unsettling than if he'd actually followed through. And I watch his expression shift from something vulnerable back to the controlled indifference he wears like a second skin. Saturday, 7 o'clock, I'll have a car pick you up from your apartment and deliver you to my house where we'll leave together to maintain the illusion that this is an actual date rather than a social experiment. This is a terrible idea. I'm going to regret agreeing to this the moment I walk into that venue and everyone realizes I don't belong there. Good. Regret builds character. And watching you navigate spaces where you supposedly don't belong while actually being more genuine than anyone else, there will be the highlight of my entire year. Later that evening, when I'm home in my small apartment trying to figure out what kind of dress someone wears to a charity gala where they're simultaneously a guest and a punchline, I get a text from an unknown number that I immediately recognize as Damien based on the tone alone. I forgot to mention that the twins insisted on helping you prepare. Apparently, Emma declared you'll need princess assistance and Oliver wants to ensure proper jewelry selection. I've been overruled by 6-year-olds, so expect them Saturday afternoon. Also, my 17-year-old brother will likely say something inappropriate. Ignore him. The casual mention of his family involvement makes this feel less like a professional assignment and more like something complicated I'm not equipped to navigate. And I find myself typing a response before logic can intervene with all the reasonable objections about why getting close to Damien Cross's family is probably worse than just attending one event. Your family doesn't need to be involved in your social experiments. I'm perfectly capable of dressing myself for public humiliation. His response is immediate. Too late. Emma has already planned your hair, and Oliver has opinions about earrings. Attempting to stop them now would require more energy than I'm willing to expend. Besides, they like you significantly more than they like most people I bring around. Might as well let them enjoy the preparation. Tier. Chapter 2. The Family That Doesn't Let It Slide. Saturday afternoon arrives with the chaos of 6-year-old twins who've apparently been planning my transformation since Damien made the mistake of mentioning the gala in their presence. And I'm sitting in what used to be their mother's vanity room, while Emma carefully sorts through a jewelry box that probably contains pieces worth more than my annual salary, and Oliver debates the merits of silver versus gold, with the kind of seriousness usually reserved for actual life-or-death decisions. Damien is leaning against the doorframe, watching this entire production, with an expression that oscillates between amused and slightly horrified that his siblings have taken over his social experiment with such enthusiastic determination. Emma, she doesn't need the diamond earrings. Those are from grandmother and significantly too formal for someone attending their first charity event. Damien's attempt at intervention is immediately overruled by his sister, who fixes him with a look that suggests she's the one in charge of this operation regardless of age differences. She needs to look like a princess. You said she's going to a fancy party, so she needs fancy jewelry. That's how it works. Emma's logic is unassailable in its simplicity, and I watch Damien concede defeat with the kind of graceful surrender that suggests he's learned arguing with his sister is an exercise in futility. Oliver, what's your professional opinion on the earring situation? Should we override Emma's diamond mandate, or just accept that our guest is going to be significantly more decorated than originally planned? The diamonds make her eyes sparkle more. I think Emma's right, even though she's bossy about everything. Oliver delivers this assessment with the kind of diplomatic skill that suggests he's going to be terrifyingly effective at negotiations when he's older. Outvoted by 6-year-olds, this is a new low in my decision-making authority. Damien's voice carries that dry humor I've started to recognize as his default when emotions get too close to the surface. The door opens to admit Damien's 17-year-old brother Marcus, all teenage confidence and complete lack of filter. And the moment he sees me sitting at the vanity with the twins fussing over jewelry, his expression shifts into something appreciative that makes me immediately uncomfortable, given the age gap and the fact that I'm technically household staff, regardless of tonight's unusual circumstances. Okay, I know I'm supposed to be helping with the whole makeover situation, but I need to say this before I forget. You're actually really beautiful. And Damien bringing you to this thing is either the smartest decision he's made in years, or he's completely oblivious to how lucky he is getting to show up with you. The compliment is delivered with such genuine teenage sincerity that I can't even be annoyed about the awkwardness. And when I glance at Damien, I find his expression has gone from amused to something colder that might be protective, or possibly territorial, in ways that seem excessive for an employer whose only interest in me should be as convenient social commentary. Marcus, you're 17 and she's 24. Also, you haven't been out of diapers long enough to be making observations about anyone's attractiveness. Damien's voice has taken on an edge I've never heard before, all controlled warning that makes Marcus grin wider like he's just discovered something interesting about his older brother's defensive instincts. I'm just stating facts. You're the one getting weird about it. Marcus settles onto the window seat with obvious entertainment. He also, for the record, bringing her to your fancy event is going to cause way more drama than you're planning for because people are going to see her and immediately realize you've been hiding someone incredible in your house for 2 years. Thank you for that analysis. Now, unless you have actual helpful contributions to make, you can leave and go do whatever teenage boys do when they're not annoying their older brothers. I'm staying for the entertainment. This is better than anything on television. Emma tugs on my sleeve to redirect my attention back to the jewelry selection, completely unbothered by her brother's verbal sparring, and when she holds up the diamond earrings next to my face, I see Damien's expression soften in ways that suggest he's struggling between maintaining his usual controlled distance and admitting that his sister's princess assessment might actually be accurate. You do look like a princess. Damien's going to have to fight people off all night to keep you from getting stolen by someone less grumpy. Emma delivers this observation with the kind of innocent certainty that makes it impossible to dismiss, and I watch Damien's jaw tighten with tension. That seems excessive for someone who claimed this entire evening was just social experiment rather than actual date. Emma, princesses are fictional characters in your storybooks. Real people don't need that kind of dramatic classification. But she looks like one anyway. Oliver agrees with me. I do agree, though I think the silver necklace works better with her dress than the gold one Marcus keeps suggesting. Tatin. Oliver's contribution brings the focus back to practical matters, and for the next 20 minutes I'm subjected to the twins debating accessories with the kind of serious attention that makes me realize they've been planning this significantly longer than the few days since Damien mentioned the event. Marcus eventually leaves with one final comment about how Damien is either playing this remarkably cool or genuinely hasn't realized what he's walking into. And after the twins are finally satisfied with their jewelry selections and sent off with promises that I'll take photos for them, I'm left alone with Damien in a room that suddenly feels too small to contain both of us and all the complicated tension that's been building since he made this ridiculous invitation. Your family is very invested in this social experiment for people who should theoretically be used to you making unconventional choices. My family has decided you're significantly more interesting than my usual companions, and they're not subtle about their preferences. I've been fielding questions all week about why I haven't brought you to events before this, if you've been working here for 2 years. He moves closer, and I'm struck by how different he looks in casual clothes, rather than his usual business attire, all relaxed elegance that somehow makes him more intimidating rather than less. What did you tell them when they asked why you've been keeping me invisible? I told them I was protecting you from being subjected to insufferable people who would either dismiss you or try to use you to get closer to me, which is partially true, even if the complete truth is more complicated than I'm comfortable admitting. And what's the complete truth? Why actually invite me to this event if it's not just about making your social circle uncomfortable? Because somewhere between Emma declaring you her favorite person in the house and Marcus pointing out that I've been noticing you significantly more than professional distance should allow, I realize that keeping you invisible was protecting me from having to acknowledge feelings that complicate everything about our working relationship. The admission is delivered quietly, like he's confessing something he didn't plan to reveal, and the vulnerability in his expression strips away the controlled mask he usually maintains. Damien, that's the kind of confession that either changes everything or makes Monday morning incredibly awkward when we both have to pretend this conversation never happened. Well, then let's see which one it becomes. Tonight you're not my housekeeper and I'm not your employer. We're just 2 people attending an event where I get to watch you prove that my family's assessment is significantly more accurate than my attempt to maintain professional distance. BT. His hand comes up to adjust one of the diamond earrings Emma insisted on, and the careful touch against my ear sends electricity through my entire nervous system that makes it impossible to maintain the logical distance I should be preserving. Your brother said you look like a princess. I think he was trying to warn me that I'm walking into something significantly more complicated than planned. Emma's voice from the doorway makes us both step apart instinctively, and when I turn, I find the 6-year-old watching with knowing eyes that suggest she understands more about adult complications than someone her age should be capable of processing. Emma, I thought you went to play with Oliver. Damien's voice carries that careful patience he uses with his siblings. I came back to make sure you're being nice to her. Marcus said you're bad at feelings, so someone needs to check. Marcus needs to stop sharing his theories with 6-year-olds who then weaponize that information. But am I wrong, though? Emma's expression is pure innocence. I know, you're unfortunately accurate. Now go find Oliver before he reorganizes my entire office trying to help. After Emma leaves with a satisfied smile that suggests she accomplished whatever mission she'd set for herself, Damien and I are left in charged silence, where everything that's been carefully unspoken for 2 years suddenly demands acknowledgement we're both trying to avoid giving. We should leave soon. The event starts in an hour, and I'd prefer to arrive after the initial crowd so your entrance has maximum impact. Maximum impact meaning maximum humiliation when everyone realizes your date is the person who cleans their houses when they visit for business meetings. Maximum impact meaning watching them realize they've been underestimating someone extraordinary because they couldn't see past employment status to actual worth. Chapter 3. The entrance that turns to silence. The car ride to the venue passes in charged silence, where I'm hyper-aware of Damien beside me in the back seat, all controlled elegance in his perfectly tailored tuxedo that somehow makes him look even more intimidating than his usual business attire. And I'm trying to regulate my breathing because the dress the twins helped me choose is significantly more elegant than anything I've ever worn, and the diamond earrings Emma insisted on are making me feel like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life. He hasn't spoken since we left his house beyond basic logistics about timing and expectations, but I can feel him watching me with that careful attention he's been trying to hide for what I'm now realizing might have been significantly longer than just the last few weeks. You're nervous. I can tell by the way you keep adjusting those earrings Emma bullied you into wearing. His voice breaks the silence with observation that's more gentle than his usual dry irony. I'm terrified. There's a difference between nervous and actively contemplating whether jumping out of a moving vehicle is preferable to walking into a room full of people who are going to immediately recognize I don't belong there. You belong anywhere you choose to be. Their recognition or lack thereof is irrelevant to your actual worth. He shifts closer, and suddenly the spacious back seat feels significantly more confined. Nay, though for what it's worth, watching you doubt yourself is making me regret framing this as a joke, because you're taking my stupid social commentary personally when the only joke here is me thinking I could spend an entire evening with you looking like that and maintain the professional distance I've been barely managing for 2 years. Damien, you can't say things like that and then expect me to walk into that venue and pretend we're just employer and employee satisfying invitation requirements. Good, because I'm done pretending that's all this is. Somewhere between Emma's princess assessment and Marcus pointing out that I'm terrible at feelings, I realized that bringing you tonight isn't about making other people uncomfortable. It's about finally admitting I want you there, because the idea of attending another one of these insufferable events without you feels impossible now that I know what having you beside me actually feels like. The confession is delivered with raw honesty that strips away every defense I've been maintaining. And before I can respond, the car is pulling up to the venue where photographers and arriving guests create exactly the kind of spectacle I'd been dreading since accepting this invitation. And last chance to change your mind, once we walk through those doors together, everyone is going to have opinions about who you are and why I brought you. Then let them have opinions. I'm done letting other people's judgment dictate choices that should only matter to us. I'm borrowing his words from our first conversation, and the smile he gives me in response is genuine enough to temporarily override my terror about what comes next. The venue is everything I expected, and worse, all crystal chandeliers and expensive people, making polite conversation while assessing everyone else's worth through the lens of social hierarchy I've only ever observed from positions of complete invisibility. And when Damien helps me out of the car with careful hands that linger longer than strictly necessary, I'm struck by the fact that this is real and happening, and there's no backing out, now that dozens of eyes are already tracking our arrival with poorly disguised interest. We move toward the entrance, and I'm trying to match his confident stride while my heart pounds with anxiety about everything that could go wrong. But then we step through the massive doors into the ballroom, and I watch something extraordinary happen that I'll remember for the rest of my life, regardless of how tonight actually ends. The conversations don't just pause, they stop completely. All polite chatter dying mid-sentence as heads turn toward us with expressions ranging from shocked recognition to barely concealed curiosity. And the silence that follows our entrance is so absolute that I can hear my own breathing despite the size of the space. Damien's hand settles on my lower back with possessive pressure that feels more like claiming than just guiding, and I'm hyper-aware of the way he's positioning us, making sure everyone sees exactly who he arrived with, and leaving no room for misinterpretation about whether my presence is intentional or just convenient circumstance. They're staring. I can feel every single person in this room cataloging my existence and trying to figure out if they know me from somewhere. I keep my voice low, because speaking normally seems impossible when the entire ballroom appears to be holding its breath. I let them stare. They're realizing that the woman I brought is significantly more interesting than anyone they expected me to arrive with. His voice carries quiet satisfaction. Also, several of my business associates are currently experiencing the unique discomfort of recognizing you from my house and processing that I brought my housekeeper as my date, which was the entire point before I realized the point didn't matter nearly as much as just having you here. So the joke worked. They're uncomfortable and confused and probably judging both of us for crossing social boundaries that apparently matter to people with too much money and not enough actual problems. The joke backfired spectacularly, because I'm not finding their discomfort nearly as entertaining as I expected. I'm too busy watching them look at you and realize you're all seeing what I've been trying to ignore for 2 years, which is that you're extraordinary, and I'm an idiot for thinking I could frame this as anything other than exactly what it is. And what is it exactly? Because I'm standing here in diamonds your sister chose while your hand is on my back, like you're making some kind of public statement. And I have no idea if we're still pretending this is professional arrangement, or if something changed between your house and this ballroom. Something changed the moment you agreed to come, maybe even before that, when Emma called you a princess, and I couldn't disagree because she was right, and I'd been actively avoiding acknowledging it. B. A man I recognize from business meetings at Damien's house approaches with a woman who looks like she walked out of a fashion magazine, both of them wearing expressions of poorly concealed shock that suggests they definitely remember me from contexts where I was invisible staff rather than unavoidable presence. Damien, I see you actually brought a date this year, very unexpected given your usual preference for attending these events solo. The man's voice carries assessment that makes his actual question clear, even if he's too polite to ask it directly. Marcus, lovely to see you. Yes, I decided it was time to stop disappointing the invitation committee by attending alone. Damien's response is deliberately vague, and I watch Marcus trying to figure out if he's supposed to recognize me or if pretending we've never met is the socially appropriate choice. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Marcus Bennett, and this is my wife, Caroline. He extends his hand with careful courtesy that suggests he's decided pretending ignorance is safer than acknowledging context. Pleasure to meet you both. I accept the handshake with as much confidence as I can manufacture, while internally screaming about the fact that Marcus Bennett has definitely seen me cleaning Damien's study at least a dozen times over the last 2 years. And you are... Caroline's question hangs in the air with deliberate weight, fishing for information that would clarify exactly who I am and why Damien brought me. Someone significantly more interesting than the usual companions people bring to these events. Damien's interjection is smooth and definitive. Now, if you'll excuse us, I see several people I need to avoid, and limited time to execute strategic positioning before they corner me with tedious conversation. He guides me away, before either of them can continue fishing for details, and I'm struck by how protective he's being, despite this entire evening supposedly being about social commentary, rather than actual care about my comfort. They recognized me. I could see it in Marcus's expression when he was trying to figure out if acknowledging that we've met before would be more or less awkward than pretending I'm a complete stranger. Let him be awkward. Watching people squirm while trying to reconcile their assumptions with reality is still entertaining, even if my motivations for enjoying it have shifted significantly. Or shifted how exactly? Shifted from wanting to make them uncomfortable about their social hierarchies to wanting to make it very clear that you're with me, and anyone who can't manage basic respect will be permanently removed from circles I control. His hand tightens on my back. Also, I'm realizing that bringing you was either the best or worst decision I've made in years, depending on whether I can actually survive an entire evening of watching other men look at you and realize what I've been trying not to acknowledge. You're jealous? That's new information about Damien Cross's emotional range. I'm experiencing something uncomfortably close to possessive territorial instinct, which is significantly more alarming than simple jealousy. Gee, the ballroom has resumed some semblance of normal conversation, but I can still feel attention tracking us as we move through the crowd. All poorly disguised interest from people who can't quite figure out who I am, or why Damien brought someone unexpected to an event where everything is usually carefully calculated and predictable. And this is working exactly like you planned. They're all uncomfortable and confused and trying to figure out if being polite to me is required, or if they can just ignore my existence like they do with other staff they encounter. Except I don't care anymore whether it's working like I planned. I care about whether you're comfortable, and whether anyone has been cruel enough to require intervention. Everything else is irrelevant to what actually matters. What actually matters being what? You, obviously. Somewhere between the car ride here and watching this entire room stop breathing when you walked in. I realized that the joke was on me the entire time. I thought I was using you to make a point about social assumptions when actually I was just finding an excuse to finally have you beside me in contexts where pretending professional distance was impossible.
I'm Lena, and I love writing amazing stories for you. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? From your bed at night? Doing chores? I love knowing where you are when these stories reach you. Subscribe to the channel too, so you can have my stories whenever you want. Now, let's go back to the moment when everything started to change.
Chapter 4. When Pride Turns to Jealousy. I'm Lena, and I love writing amazing stories for you. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? From your bed at night? Doing chores? I love knowing where you are when these stories reach you. Subscribe to the channel too, so you can have my stories whenever you want. Now, let's go back to the moment when everything started to change. The first hour passes in a blur of introductions, where I'm forced to navigate conversations with people who range from genuinely curious to barely concealing their assessment of whether I'm worthy of standing beside Damien Cross at an event where social hierarchy is usually carefully maintained and predictable. And I'm discovering that years of being invisible have actually made me quite good at reading subtext in polite conversations, where every word carries implications beyond surface meaning. A woman named Victoria approaches with warmth that feels authentic rather than performative, immediately complimenting my dress and asking intelligent questions about my background that suggest she's actually interested in answers rather than just fishing for gossip to share later. You're a refreshing change from the usual crowd Damien brings to these things, though I use the word brings loosely since he typically arrives alone and spends the entire evening looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Victoria's smile is genuine, as she gestures toward where Damien is currently trapped in conversation with several business associates who clearly have no intention of letting him escape easily. Watching him actually stay close to someone instead of strategically positioning himself near exits is fascinating. I've known him for years and I've never seen him this attentive to anyone's presence. He's being protective because this is my first event like this, and he knows I'm completely out of my depth, navigating social dynamics I don't understand. Or he's being possessive because he's finally found someone interesting enough to hold his attention longer than 5 minutes. Victoria's observation is delivered with knowing amusement. Either way, you're causing quite the stir. Half the room is trying to figure out who you are, and the other half is trying to figure out how to approach you without acknowledging they're dying of curiosity. Before I can respond, a man I don't recognize joins our conversation with polite interest that seems genuine, introducing himself as David Chen, and immediately engaging Victoria in discussion about a book they've both read while seamlessly including me in ways that make it clear he's practiced at making people feel comfortable in situations where they might feel excluded. The conversation flows easily, touching on literature and art and current events with the kind of intellectual depth I've craved but rarely found in my usual social circles. And I'm so engaged in debate about a particular author's thematic choices that I don't immediately notice Damien has extracted himself from his business associates and is watching our interaction with an intensity that makes my skin prickle with awareness. David, I see you've discovered that my date is significantly more interesting than most of the people here. Try not to monopolize her entire evening with literary analysis. Damien's voice carries that dry humor, but there's an edge underneath that suggests he's not entirely pleased about how engaged I've been in conversation with someone else. Damien, good to see you actually staying at one of these events longer than your usual 15-minute obligation fulfillment. David's response is friendly, but I catch the slight emphasis on actually staying that implies this is unusual behavior. Your companion was just demonstrating considerably more insight into contemporary fiction than most people I discuss literature with. You've been hiding someone exceptional, I'm aware, which is why I'm interrupting before you convince her that spending time with people who read books is preferable to spending time with me. The casual admission of awareness combined with the possessive way his hand finds my waist suggests David's observation about Damien being attentive isn't wrong, and when I glance up, I find him watching me with something that looks dangerously close to pride mixed with that territorial instinct he admitted to in the car. I should circulate. Lovely meeting you both. We should continue that discussion about narrative structure sometime when Damien isn't glaring at me for keeping you occupied. David excuses himself with knowing humor. And suddenly I'm alone with Damien in the middle of a crowded ballroom where his hand is still possessively placed, and his expression suggests he's processing feelings he didn't anticipate having. You were enjoying that conversation. I could tell by the way you completely forgot I was standing 10 feet away watching David Chen make you laugh. I was having an intellectually stimulating discussion with someone who treats me like an equal. Yes, I enjoyed it. Is that a problem? The problem is watching you be interesting and engaged with someone else is making me realize exactly how much I want to be the only person who gets to see you like that. His voice has gone low and intimate despite the public setting, and which is irrational and possessive, and exactly the kind of complication I was trying to avoid by framing tonight as social commentary, instead of admitting I wanted you here for entirely selfish reasons. Damien, you can't be jealous of a polite conversation about books. That's excessive even for someone who just admitted to territorial instinct. I'm discovering that where you're concerned, my capacity for excessive behavior is significantly larger than previously documented. Before I can respond to that loaded statement, a familiar voice cuts through the nearby conversations with the kind of teenage confidence that makes me immediately recognize Marcus, despite the crowd between us and wherever he's currently positioned. Told you she was beautiful. Also told you bringing her would cause drama. You're welcome for being right about literally everything. Marcus appears with a grin that suggests he's been watching this entire evening unfold with entertainment, and when Damien's expression shifts from possessive to annoyed, I realize his younger brother has been somewhere in this venue the entire time, probably tracking our interactions for maximum teasing potential. Marcus, what are you doing here? You're 17, and this is an adult event with age restrictions you're definitely violating. Mom's on the board. I'm her +1 because Dad had work. Also, I wanted to see how spectacularly you'd handle bringing her to something like this. Marcus's attention shifts to me with approval. For the record, you look amazing. And every guy here has noticed, which is why Damien keeps positioning himself like a territorial guard dog. Marcus, go find the dessert table or literally anywhere that isn't here. Can't. I'm enjoying watching you experience emotions in public. It's educational seeing you struggle with feelings you've been denying. I will physically remove you from this venue. Empty threat. Mom would kill you. Marcus is completely unbothered by his brother's warning. Also, you should probably know that Victoria and David are taking bets on how long it takes you to admit you're actually dating her instead of just bringing her a social statement. Current odds are heavily in favor of you cracking before the night ends. Why are my friends placing bets on my personal life? Because watching you finally care about something beyond work is apparently peak entertainment for people who've known you for years. Also, she keeps looking at you like you're interesting, which everyone finds fascinating given your usual personality. Go drink juice boxes with other children your age. There are no other children here. I'm sophisticatedly observing adult social dynamics. I'm trying not to laugh at their exchange because Marcus is clearly enjoying needling his older brother, and Damien's controlled irritation suggests this is normal sibling dynamic. But then Marcus says something that makes the entire interaction shift from amusing to complicated. Seriously though, she's great, and you should stop pretending this is casual before someone else realizes what you've been too stubborn to admit and tries to pursue her properly.
Okay, the 17-year-old brother just said what everyone already knew, except for the two of them.
The protective warning in Marcus's voice despite his age makes it clear he's not just teasing, and when I look at Damien, I see his expression has gone serious, in ways that suggest his brother's observation hit closer to truth than he's comfortable with. Marcus, thank you for that unsolicited advice. Now please go literally anywhere else before I forget your family and handle this less diplomatically. Fine, but I'm texting Emma and Oliver updates because they made me promise to report if you were being nice to her. After Marcus finally leaves with a satisfied grin, Damien and I are left in charged silence where everything his brother said hangs between us, demanding acknowledgement neither of us seems ready to give. Your brother is perceptive for 17, also apparently invested in making sure you don't mess this up, whatever this actually is. My entire family has decided they prefer you to my usual companions, and they're not subtle about their interference. I've been fielding texts from Emma all evening, asking if I'm remembering to be nice and not scary. Are you being nice, or are you being territorial and possessive, while pretending it's just protective employer behavior? I'm being honest about the fact that watching other men talk to you is significantly harder than I anticipated, and I'm running out of rational explanations for why that's affecting me so much. His hand slides from my waist to capture my hand properly, threading our fingers together in a gesture that's too intimate for professional relationship. Marcus is right that I'm terrible at this, at feelings and admitting when something matters more than I want it to. But you matter, and pretending otherwise stopped being possible somewhere between your entrance, silencing this entire ballroom, and David Chen making you laugh about books. Damien, we're in the middle of a charity gala surrounded by people who are definitely noticing that you're holding my hand like we're together. This is significantly beyond social commentary territory. Good, let them notice. I'm done caring what anyone thinks about choices that only affect us. End Chapter 4. Chapter 5. The chemistry he didn't plan. We escape to a private terrace an hour later, when the constant performance of navigating social warfare becomes too exhausting to maintain without breaking, and the relief of being alone with Damien in the cool night air makes me realize how much energy I've been expending just existing in spaces where my presence is constantly being evaluated by people who can't decide if I'm worth basic courtesy or just his temporary entertainment. He's quiet for a long moment, leaning against the stone railing with that careful control that suggests he's processing something he doesn't quite know how to articulate. And when he finally speaks, his voice carries a vulnerability I've never heard from him in 2 years of daily interaction, where everything was carefully filtered through professional distance. And I owe you an apology for framing this entire evening as a joke, for thinking I could bring you here as social commentary and not have it mean something significantly more complicated than just making entitled people uncomfortable. You're apologizing. That's unexpected character development for someone who usually doubles down on questionable decisions, rather than admitting they were wrong. I'm learning that where you're concerned, my usual strategies don't work. You make me want to be honest instead of just strategically positioning myself for maximum control. He turns to face me fully, and the city lights create a backdrop that's almost romantic if I ignore the fact that we're at an event where he initially brought me as a punchline. Watching you tonight, seeing you hold conversations with people like David while being genuinely yourself instead of performing for anyone's benefit, it made me realize I've been an idiot for 2 years, thinking I could keep you at professional distance when what I actually wanted was exactly this. And what is this exactly? Because I'm standing here in diamonds your sister chose while you apologize for jokes that stopped being funny the moment I agreed to come, and I have no idea if we're having a moment, or if this is just you processing guilt about using me as social experiment. This is me admitting that the joke was always on me, that I convinced myself bringing you was about making a point when really it was just the first excuse I could manufacture to have you beside me in contexts where pretending I don't care became impossible. His hand comes up to touch my face with gentleness that contradicts the intensity in his expression. You're brilliant and funny, and you see through my sarcasm to the actual person underneath, and watching you prove that to everyone here tonight while I stood there being possessive and territorial made me realize I'm completely gone for you in ways I don't know how to handle gracefully. That's the most romantically incompetent confession I've ever received, which somehow makes it more believable than if you'd rehearsed something smooth. I don't do smooth. I do controlled and calculated and occasionally honest when someone makes it impossible to maintain the usual defenses. So what now? We acknowledge this thing between us and figure out how to navigate it without destroying my employment and your reputation, or we pretend this conversation never happened and go back to you barely acknowledging my existence while I clean your house. We acknowledge it, and accept that Monday morning is going to be complicated but preferable to spending another 2 years pretending professional distance is protecting either of us from feelings that clearly aren't going away. Your family is going to be insufferably smug about being right. Emma's going to demand details and Marcus is going to tease you mercilessly. I've accepted that my siblings have better emotional intelligence than I do, and I deserve whatever commentary they deliver. His thumb strokes across my cheekbone in a gesture that's becoming familiar. But before we go back inside and face whatever social consequences tonight has created, I need you to understand that this isn't casual for me. I don't do casual about things that matter, and you matter in ways that are frankly terrifying, given my usual approach to emotional vulnerability. Damien Cross admitting to emotional vulnerability. I should document this moment for future reference when you inevitably return to being impossible and controlled. Please do. I'll need the reminder that I'm capable of honesty. When you're dealing with me being difficult about feelings I don't know how to process properly. Or, his kiss is careful and questioning, giving me space to pull back if this is too much too fast. But instead I find myself pulling him closer because 2 years of professional distance has left me starving for exactly this kind of honest connection. The kiss deepens with restrained intensity, all the want we've been suppressing finding careful release in touches that map territory we've both been imagining, but never quite allowed ourselves to explore. And when we finally break apart, we're both breathing hard, and the terrace suddenly feels charged with possibility. That's both thrilling and slightly overwhelming. We should go back inside before people start speculating about what we're doing out here alone. Let them speculate. I'm done managing other people's opinions about choices that only affect us. His forehead rests against mine, though we should probably make an appearance before Victoria wins her bet about how long it would take me to admit this is real. There's actually a bet. Marcus wasn't just making that up to needle you. Victoria texted me 20 minutes ago with updated odds. Apparently watching me be obvious about my feelings is entertainment for people who've known me long enough to find the novelty fascinating. Hey, your friends are betting on your emotional availability. That's either very supportive or deeply concerning depending on perspective. Both, They contain multitudes of questionable behavior disguised as friendship. We return to the ballroom, and I'm immediately struck by how different everything feels now that we've acknowledged what exists between us. Walking through crowds with his hand possessively placed on my back, but this time it feels like partnership rather than just protective gesture. Victoria catches my eye from across the room and gives me a thumbs up that suggests she's won whatever bet she placed. And when Marcus appears with Emma and Oliver in tow, I realize his entire family has apparently coordinated to attend this event specifically to witness how tonight unfolded. Emma insisted we come find you because she wants confirmation that Damien is being nice. Apparently she doesn't trust him to follow through without supervision. Marcus's grin is unrepentant. Are you being nice to her? Because I told Marcus to check, and he said you were holding hands, which means you're probably being nice, but I wanted to make sure. Emma's serious expression as she addresses her oldest brother makes it clear she takes her supervisory responsibilities very seriously. I'm being nice, I promise. Also, why are you here when this event supposedly has age restrictions? Mom brought us because we wanted to see her dress and make sure you weren't being grumpy. Emma's logic is unassailable. Also, Oliver wanted to see if the diamond earrings worked, and they do. She looks like a princess, just like I said. You were right about everything. She does look like a princess, and I was being stubborn about admitting it. Damien's concession to his sister's assessment is delivered with surprising grace. And does this mean you're going to keep bringing her to places instead of coming alone and being boring? Oliver's question is innocent, but loaded with hope. Yes, if she'll tolerate being seen in public with someone who's terrible at feelings and occasionally uses sarcasm as a defense mechanism. I think I can manage that, as long as you keep letting your siblings supervise to make sure you don't mess it up. Deal, though I reserve the right to be moderately grumpy about their interference. Emma hugs my waist with the kind of fierce affection that suggests she's claimed me as part of their family, regardless of what complications might arise. And when I look at Damien over her head, I see his expression has softened in ways that make it clear his feelings about tonight have shifted from social experiment to something significantly more genuine. We should let you get back to adult conversations. Mom said we can only stay for 10 more minutes before we have to leave. Marcus starts herding the twins toward the exit. But for the record, you did good tonight, both of you. And I'm only going to tease you about this moderately instead of mercilessly. Your restraint is appreciated. Also, Emma made me promise to tell you she thinks you should get married because then she'd get to be flower girly, so consider that unsolicited advice from a 6-year-old. After his siblings leave with their mother, who gives us both a knowing smile that suggests she's been coordinating this entire family intervention, Damien and I are left in the middle of a ballroom that's significantly less intimidating now that the worst of the social performance is over. Your sister wants us to get married so she can be a flower girl. That's moving remarkably fast from first date to wedding planning. Emma has always been ambitious in her goals, though for the record, I'm not opposed to the eventual outcome, even if the timeline is somewhat accelerated. Damien Cross talking about eventual marriage after one evening together. You really are terrible at feelings if you're already planning that far ahead. I'm planning based on the fact that I've wanted this for 2 years, and waiting longer seems pointless now that you're finally here, and apparently willing to tolerate my emotional incompetence. Chapter 6. The Aftermath. Monday morning arrives with the uncomfortable reality that I'm supposed to return to. Damien's house for work after spending Saturday night being his date, and Sunday fielding text messages from Emma, asking detailed questions about whether her brother is still being nice, or if she needs to intervene with more supervision. And I'm standing outside his front door at 7 in the morning, trying to figure out how to navigate entering a space I've occupied as staff for 2 years, when everything about our dynamic has fundamentally shifted in ways neither of us fully knows how to handle. The door opens before I can use my key, and Damien is standing there already dressed for work, looking like he's been awake for hours, probably overthinking this exact moment. You were going to stand out there debating whether to use your key or knock like a guest. I could see you through the security camera processing the entire decision. His voice carries that dry humor, but there's tension underneath that suggests he's just as uncertain about how this works as I am. I was trying to figure out if I'm still your housekeeper, or if Saturday changed that along with everything else. Appropriate entry methods seem relevant to clarifying role boundaries. You're definitely not just my housekeeper anymore, though we should probably discuss what you actually are before the twins wake up and start planning our wedding with Emma's characteristic enthusiasm. He steps aside to let me enter, and the familiar space feels different now that I've been here as something other than staff. Your house feels strange when I'm not immediately cataloging what needs cleaning. This is going to take adjustment. Everything is going to take adjustment, but we'll figure it out together instead of me just issuing instructions and you maintaining professional distance. We're standing in his foyer having what might be the most awkward conversation of my life, when Emma appears at the top of the stairs in pajamas, immediately lighting up when she sees me. and racing down with the kind of enthusiasm that suggests she's been waiting for my arrival. You came back. Marcus said you might not come back because Damien is bad at talking about feelings and might have scared you away with his grumpy face. I came back, though your brother and I are still figuring out how this works now that everything is different. It works by him being nice and you staying here forever and maybe eventually getting married so I can be a flower girl. Emma's solution is delivered with absolute certainty. And also, Marcus wants to know if Damien held your hand the whole way home, or if he was weird about it. Marcus needs to stop using you as a spy. Also, I was not weird about it. I held her hand appropriately for someone who's navigating new relationship dynamics. Damien's appearance behind me suggests he's been listening to this entire exchange. Marcus says you're always weird about feelings, so being not weird would be the weird part. Emma's logic is characteristically unassailable. Oliver joins us with his usual quiet observation, immediately assessing the situation with careful attention before delivering his verdict. You look happy, both of you, so I think Marcus is wrong about Damien messing it up. Thank you for that vote of confidence, though the day is young and I still have plenty of time to be emotionally incompetent. The week that follows is a study in adjustment where I'm trying to balance being Damien's girlfriend with still maintaining some professional responsibilities, while his family collectively decides they're going to supervise every interaction to ensure he doesn't sabotage things with his usual emotional avoidance. The twins demand daily updates about whether he's being nice. Marcus provides running commentary about every perceived romantic failure, and their mother stops by with increasingly transparent excuses to check on how we're navigating the transition. Thursday afternoon, I'm organizing Damien's study when Marcus appears with the kind of energy that suggests he's about to deliver commentary I'm not going to enjoy. So there's apparently drama happening in Damien's social circle about him bringing you to the gala. Someone named Vanessa has been calling mutual friends trying to figure out who you are and why he chose you over more appropriate options. Appropriate meaning someone from his social class who wouldn't raise questions about whether he's lost his mind. Exactly. Vanessa is apparently very invested in making sure everyone knows that bringing household staff to formal events is either brave social commentary or evidence of poor judgment depending on who's asking. Marcus settles into a chair with obvious entertainment value. Damien's been getting texts all week from people wanting to know if it was serious or just a statement. What has he been telling them? That it's none of their business, and anyone who has a problem with his choices can direct complaints to him personally rather than gossiping like teenagers. Marcus's grin suggests he finds his brother's protective aggression entertaining. Also, he may have told Vanessa specifically that her opinion is irrelevant, and she should focus on her own relationships, instead of critiquing his. He actually said that to someone who's probably influential in his social circles. He said significantly worse than that, but I'm paraphrasing for polite company. Damien appears in the doorway with timing that suggests he's been monitoring this conversation. Marcus, stop gossiping about my personal life to my girlfriend. Also, Vanessa's influence is significantly less important than she believes, and I'm not concerned about social consequences from people whose approval I've never actually valued. I'm just keeping her informed about the drama you're creating by choosing authenticity over social expectations. You're welcome for the service. Your service is noted and unappreciated. Now go do homework or whatever 17-year-olds do when they're not interfering in adult relationships. After Marcus leaves with a satisfied grin, Damien moves into the study with an expression that suggests he's been dealing with exactly the kind of social fallout Marcus described. And Vanessa has been persistent about expressing her opinions on my choice in companions. Apparently, bringing you to the gala has raised questions about my judgment that she feels qualified to critique. Should I be concerned about influential people in your social circle thinking I'm evidence of poor decision-making? You should be confident that I've spent the week making it very clear to anyone who'll listen that you're not a decision I'm questioning, and they can either accept that or find themselves removed from circles I control. He moves closer with that possessive energy I've learned to recognize as his default when someone threatens what he considers his. Vanessa specifically was informed that her continued commentary on my personal life would result in professional consequences she's not prepared to face. You threatened business consequences because she was rude about me. That seems excessive for someone who claimed this started as social commentary. It stopped being social commentary the moment you walked into that ballroom. Everything since then has been me protecting what matters while dealing with people who think class boundaries are more important than actual connection. Your family has been aggressively supportive in ways that suggest they're running interference for us. Emma asked me yesterday if anyone had been mean and needed her to talk to them. Emma has decided you're family, and she takes family protection very seriously despite being 6. I've been fielding her reports about potential threats with appropriate gravity. Your 6-year-old sister is monitoring social threats on my behalf. This family is wonderfully chaotic. They're invested in making sure I don't mess this up because they've apparently decided you're the best thing that's happened to our household in years. His hand finds mine with familiar ease. For what it's worth, I agree with their assessment, even if I'm terrible at expressing it without sounding emotionally stunted. You're getting better at it, though Emma did suggest you might benefit from practice expressing feelings more regularly, and Emma has a lot of opinions about my emotional development. I'm learning to accept her guidance even when it comes from someone who still believes in fairy tales. Friday evening brings unexpected drama when Vanessa herself appears at Damien's house with the kind of calculated timing that suggests she's been waiting for an opportunity to address the situation directly. And I'm in the kitchen preparing dinner when the doorbell rings with the particular tone that suggests whoever's arriving expects to be received with more ceremony than I'm prepared to provide. Damien answers with controlled courtesy that doesn't quite hide his irritation about the uninvited visit, and I can hear Vanessa's voice carrying from the foyer with deliberate projection that makes it clear she wants to be overheard. Damien, darling, I thought we should discuss your recent choices before the gossip becomes too established to correct. Bringing your housekeeper to the Bennett Gala has created exactly the kind of speculation you usually avoid. And Vanessa, I don't recall inviting you to my home or requesting your input on my personal decisions. When someone needs to provide perspective before you damage relationships that took years to build, surely you understand that choosing inappropriate companions reflects on everyone in our social circle. The only inappropriate thing here is you appearing uninvited to critique choices that don't concern you. I move to the kitchen doorway, where I can see them both, and Vanessa's expression when she notices me shifts from calculated concern to barely disguised contempt. Oh, you're still here. I assumed this was a temporary arrangement that would resolve itself once Damien realized the social complications. I live here, so yes, I'm still here, and I'll continue to be here regardless of your assumptions about temporary arrangements. How charming. You're playing house with the help. Very progressive of you. Damien, though I question the sustainability of relationships built on such unequal foundations. The only unequal thing here is your assumption that birth circumstances matter more than actual character. Damien's voice has gone cold in that particular way that means someone has crossed a line they're going to regret. You're going to leave now, and you're not going to return. And if I hear that you've continued spreading commentary about my relationship, I'll ensure that business opportunities you've been pursuing through our mutual connections become significantly less available. You're threatening me over your housekeeper. That's remarkably short-sighted. I'm protecting my girlfriend from someone who thinks social hierarchy excuses being cruel. There's a significant difference. Emma appears at the top of the stairs in pajamas, having apparently been listening to this entire exchange. You're being mean to her, and that's not allowed. Damien said anyone who's mean has to leave, and you're being really mean. Darling, adults are having a conversation. Adults shouldn't be mean. That's what Mommy says. So you should leave like Damien said. Emma's 6-year-old authority is delivered with absolute confidence. Vanessa's departure is less graceful than her arrival. All barely contained outrage about being dismissed by both Damien and his elementary school-aged sister, and after the door closes behind her, Emma descends the stairs with satisfaction. I told Marcus someone was being mean and needed to be told to leave. He said, to let you handle it, but I wanted to help. You helped perfectly, though you're supposed to be asleep. I was getting water and heard the mean lady, so I stayed to make
A condescending ex-girlfriend being kicked out by a 6-year-old. In real life, that's rude. But here, I listen to the whole thing, and I even get excited when Emma tells her to leave.
Chapter 7. Who Laughed Last? 6 months after the gala that changed everything, I'm standing in Damien's bedroom watching him struggle with his bow tie, while Emma provides unhelpful commentary from her position on the bed where she's been supervising our preparation for another charity event with the kind of serious attention she brings to all matters she considers important. And the familiarity of this routine makes me realize how completely my life has transformed from invisible housekeeper to integral part of a family that's claimed me as their own with characteristic intensity. I'm no longer employed by the Cross family in any official capacity, having transitioned to consulting work that lets me maintain independence while building something entirely my own. And the financial stability Damien insisted on providing during that transition has given me freedom to make choices based on what I actually want, rather than just survival necessity. You're doing it wrong again. You always do the bow tie wrong, and then she has to fix it. Emma's observation is delivered with the kind of exasperated patience usually reserved for much older siblings. I'm deliberately doing it wrong so she has an excuse to stand close to me. It's strategic incompetence. Damien's admission makes me laugh as I move to fix the tie he's absolutely capable of managing himself. And that's manipulative. You should just ask for closeness instead of pretending you can't dress yourself. Where's the fun in direct communication when I can create situations that require your intervention? His hands settle on my waist while I work on the bow tie. And 6 months of this particular dynamic has made me very aware that his strategic incompetence extends to numerous areas where he's perfectly capable but prefers my involvement. You're both being weird. Marcus said adults are supposed to be better at talking about feelings, but you're still playing games. Emma's judgment is swift and accurate. Marcus talks too much about things that aren't his business. Also, your assessment of adult emotional competence is depressingly accurate. Oliver appears in the doorway with his usual quiet observation, immediately taking in the scene with careful attention before delivering his contribution. A mom says we're leaving in 10 minutes and Emma needs to stop supervising because they're capable of getting ready without management. But he was doing the bow tie wrong. Someone had to intervene. He does it wrong on purpose. We all know this. It's part of their routine. Oliver's matter-of-fact delivery of this observation suggests the entire family has been tracking Damien's strategic incompetence with amusement. After the twins are herded out by their mother, who gives us both knowing smiles about needing a few minutes alone, Damien pulls me closer with the kind of easy affection that's become natural over months of learning how to actually be together without professional boundaries complicating everything. And are you ready to face the same people who watched you walk into that ballroom 6 months ago, except this time as my actual girlfriend rather than the date I claimed was social commentary? I'm ready to watch them realize that the joke they thought was temporary has become permanent. Also, I'm curious whether Vanessa will be there looking miserable about the fact that her predictions about sustainability were completely wrong. Vanessa has been notably absent from events where she knows we'll be attending. I think Emma's dismissal wounded her pride more than my professional threats. Your 6-year-old sister is terrifyingly effective at social warfare. I'm glad she's on our side. Emma has decided you're family, which means she'll defend you against anyone regardless of age or social standing. It's simultaneously heartwarming and slightly concerning. The venue is the same ballroom where everything started, and walking in on Damien's arm this time feels fundamentally different from that first terrifying entrance where I'd been convinced everyone could see through my borrowed confidence to the housekeeper underneath. This time, I'm wearing a dress I chose myself, jewelry that's mine rather than borrowed from his family collection, and the confidence that comes from 6 months of proving that I belong in his life, regardless of what social hierarchies suggest should be possible. The silence that greets our entrance is nothing like the shocked pause from 6 months ago. This time it's acknowledging awareness from people who've spent half a year watching us prove that what started as a joke has become something genuine. And I can see recognition in expressions that suggest they've accepted that we're not going anywhere regardless of their initial judgments. Victoria approaches first with warm enthusiasm, immediately pulling me into a hug that's become familiar over months of actual friendship rather than just polite acquaintance. You're absolutely glowing. I told Damien 6 months ago that bringing you would be the best decision he'd made in years, and I'm delighted to have been proven correct. You also won money betting on how long it would take him to admit his feelings, so your delight is somewhat financially motivated. The money was just bonus. Watching him actually happy instead of just controlled and distant is the real reward. Victoria's attention shifts to Damien with knowing amusement. You're significantly less terrifying when you're in love. It's disconcerting for those of us who've known you for years. I contain multitudes. Apparently one of those multitudes is capable of emotional vulnerability when properly motivated. Properly motivated meaning she threatened to leave if you didn't learn to communicate like an actual human. Among other interventions, my entire family has been aggressively coaching me on appropriate relationship behavior. David Chen joins us with his usual intellectual warmth, immediately engaging me in conversation about a book he'd recommended months ago that's led to ongoing discussion about narrative structure and thematic development. And I'm struck by how natural it feels to exist in these spaces now that I'm not constantly questioning whether I belong or just performing belonging for Damien's benefit. Marcus appears with the twins in tow, all 3 of them dressed formally and looking remarkably well-behaved for approximately 5 minutes before chaos inevitably emerges. Emma wanted me to tell you that she's been watching to make sure Damien is being nice, and so far he's passed inspection. Marcus delivers this message with theatrical seriousness. And I'm always nice now. It's exhausting, but apparently required for maintaining relationship stability. You're not always nice. You're just less grumpy than before. There's a difference. Emma's correction is delivered with her characteristic precision. I stand corrected. I'm less grumpy than before. Is that sufficient for continued approval? It's acceptable, but you should probably hold her hand more because people need to know she's your girlfriend and not just someone you brought to be polite. Damien immediately takes my hand with exaggerated compliance, threading our fingers together with the kind of easy intimacy that's become his default whenever we're in public spaces. And Emma nods with satisfaction that her guidance has been appropriately implemented. The evening progresses with conversations and introductions where I'm treated as Damien's equal rather than his questionable choice. All careful courtesy from people who've apparently decided that accepting our relationship is preferable to being excluded from his professional and social circles. And by the time we escape to the same terrace where he'd first admitted his feelings 6 months ago, I'm exhausted from performing, but also exhilarated by how completely everything has changed. 6 months ago, I brought you here expecting social commentary and got emotional honesty I wasn't prepared to handle. Tonight, I brought you here as my girlfriend and spent the entire evening being grateful that the joke backfired so spectacularly. His arms wrap around me from behind, and the city lights create the same romantic backdrop they did that first night. Your family is going to want updates about whether you were appropriately romantic during our terrace moment. Emma made me promise to report if you said anything sweet. Then tell her I said that loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done despite being terrible at feelings, and that I'm planning to keep being less grumpy for the foreseeable future if it means you stay exactly where you are. And that's actually very sweet. Emma will be proud of your emotional development. My 6-year-old sister has become my relationship coach. I've accepted this reality. We return to the ballroom, and I'm struck by how natural it feels to exist here now, no longer invisible by necessity, but choosing visibility. Because being seen beside Damien means being part of something that matters more than any social acceptance ever could. His hand finds mine again with that familiar possessiveness. And across the room, I see Emma giving us a thumbs up that suggests her supervision has concluded with satisfactory results. A woman I don't recognize watches from near the bar with an expression that's carefully neutral, but somehow feels assessing in ways that suggest history I'm not aware of. And when Damien notices her attention, his hand tightens on mine with protective instinct. That's Catherine. Someone I dated briefly years ago, who's apparently decided attending events where she knows I'll be, is worth the discomfort of watching me with someone else. Should I be concerned about ex-girlfriends who observe from distances? You should be confident that anyone from my past is irrelevant compared to what we're building, Catherine included. Very smooth. Emma would approve of that reassurance. I'm learning from the best. My sister's romantic coaching is surprisingly effective. Catherine approaches before we can escape. All calculated grace and polite inquiry that barely disguises whatever assessment she's conducting. Damien, lovely to see you actually staying for an entire event. Very unlike your usual approach to these obligations. Catherine, unexpected to see you here. I thought you'd moved to the West Coast for work. I'm back for a few months, consulting on a project, and I heard interesting things about your recent relationship developments. Her attention shifts to me with cool assessment. You must be the famous girlfriend who started as household staff. Quite the unconventional choice. I prefer to think of it as Damien finally recognizing quality when it was right in front of him rather than just choosing conventionally appropriate options. How charmingly confident. I suppose confidence is necessary when entering circles where you weren't exactly born to belong. The condescension is delivered with enough sweetness to maintain plausible deniability. Catherine, I'm going to give you exactly one opportunity to rephrase that comment in a way that doesn't require me to have very different conversations about professional connections you've been rebuilding. Damien's voice has gone cold in that particular way that signals he's done being polite. I meant no offense. Simply observing that some adjustments must be required. The only adjustment required is you learning that my personal choices aren't subject to your commentary. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have better conversations to participate in. And he guides me away before Catherine can continue, and I'm struck by how immediate his protective response has become over 6 months of watching people try to diminish what we've built together. Your ex-girlfriend is unpleasant. I understand why she's an ex. She's representative of why I spent years avoiding relationships entirely. Too much performance and calculation and not enough actual connection. His hand finds my face with familiar gentleness. You're the opposite of that, all genuine feeling and honest response, and I'm grateful every day that the joke I planned backfired into something real. Damien Cross being publicly grateful and romantic, your transformation is complete. My transformation is ongoing and heavily supervised by my entire family. But yes, I'm grateful, and occasionally romantic when properly motivated. Emma appears with Oliver trailing behind, both of them looking satisfied with how the evening has unfolded. Marcus said to tell you that Catherine was being mean and you handled it well. Also, I think you should probably leave soon because Oliver and I are tired and Mom wants to go home. Excellent timing. I was about to suggest we make our exit before anyone else from my past decides to offer unsolicited opinions. Adi. We leave together with his family, and driving home with the twins, providing commentary about everything they observed while Marcus adds his own analysis of social dynamics. I'm struck by how completely I've been absorbed into this chaotic, loving, aggressively supportive family that's claimed me as their own. Later, when we're alone in Damien's room and the house has finally quieted, he pulls me close with the kind of tender possession that's become his signature. Hun, I love you. I should say it more often instead of just showing it through strategic bow tie incompetence. I love you too, though the strategic incompetence is part of your charm. Emma says I should be more verbally affectionate. Apparently actions alone aren't sufficient relationship maintenance. Emma is wise beyond her years. You should continue taking her coaching seriously. I plan to. She's already planning our wedding with characteristic enthusiasm. Apparently she's been designing flower girl dresses in her spare time. We've been together 6 months and your sister is already planning our wedding. That's optimistically presumptuous. Or it's accurately predicting what we both know is inevitable. I'm planning to marry you eventually. Emma is just accelerating the timeline with her usual efficiency. The casual declaration of intention should probably feel premature, but instead it feels exactly right. Like everything that's happened since that first gala has been building toward exactly this kind of permanent future. Eventually meaning what timeline? Meaning when you're ready, and I've proven I'm capable of consistent emotional availability rather than just periodic romantic gestures, Emma's timeline notwithstanding. That's remarkably patient for someone whose family is actively planning a wedding. I'm learning patience along with all the other emotional competencies your presence requires. It's character building. I kiss him instead of trying to articulate how much his transformation means. And in the quiet of his room, with the certainty of his love surrounding me, I realize that what started as a joke has become the most genuine thing in both our lives. He brought me as social commentary. I became his entire world, and somewhere between that first terrifying entrance and tonight's comfortable belonging, we both discovered that the best relationships are the ones that surprise you by being exactly what you didn't know you needed. The end.
I wrote this because there's a truth that nobody talks about. We don't need to change to be seen. We need to find those who already see us. Damien didn't discover her. He stopped resisting what he always knew. And Emma? That child understood in seconds what adults take years to understand. Soul recognizes soul. Simple as that. It has nothing to do with class, money, or the place you occupy. It has to do with who you allow in and who truly sees you. Sometimes, transformation isn't about becoming another person. It's about stopping hiding from who you've always been. Thank you for being here.